Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. On this podcast, we look at everything around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Hi, friends. Today's episode, I'm answering your questions. Thank you for sending them in. I got quite a few questions, so we're going to break this down into part 1 and part 2. No time to waste. Let's get straight into it. So the first question is around podcasting. I love this because I often get questions about podcasting and starting a podcast. This may help someone out there thinking about this, someone else other than the person asking the question. How do you prepare for podcast episodes? Do you recommend scripting or flowing with your intuition? What did you need to get started in terms of programs, I think they're meaning? And that was the question. And then they sent another question and said, and how do you move through imposter syndrome? Great question. First of all, it's actually not as hard to start a podcast as you think. I spent a lot of time before starting this podcast really thinking about and assuming it was going to be really hard, especially with the technology, but it's doable, it's manageable. So I use a program called Riverside. And if you're accessing Riverside when you're recording or you're a guest on my profile, on my podcast, essentially it just looks like similar to a Zoom call. I use Riverside to record the podcast and to edit the podcast. And although in the future I'd love to have an editor, it would cut me some time. The editing process in Riverside is actually quite easy because you can remove words and there's a transcript. You can edit it by the text. In terms of hosting, a hosting platform, I use a program called Buzzsprout. So once I've recorded and edited an episode, I put it up on Buzzsprout and that distributes it to all of the platforms. I think that's how it goes. Anyway, that's how it goes from my end. So 2 programs, that's all I need. I had a mic. I need to get a new mic. As you may have noticed on some of my episodes, the sound quality's gone down a bit. I think I need to upgrade again. And that's about it. That's all that I needed there. In terms of scripting versus intuition, well, you can probably go back and listen to some of the initial episodes. I definitely sound a lot more monotone. I had bullet points. I scripted a lot more. But now that I'm becoming more comfortable, I tend to trust what comes up. And that's something that I've really been practicing more generally speaking. And I'm using this podcast as growth in that area to really lean into what's present on my mind and what's coming up. And I think, of course, that depends on what kind of podcast you're hosting or you want to host. If it's more informative, then it's quite good to script because you can follow that until you build your confidence. I think whatever works, it's different for everyone. Let's move into the imposter syndrome part of the question. I will just share with you what I needed to hear before I started this podcast. And this will apply to anyone sitting there listening who wants to take a leap of faith and step out of their comfort zone, do something that is on their heart that they would love to do. But they're feeling held back. What if I'm not good enough? What other people know more than me? All those things that come up with imposter syndrome. Feeling like an imposter when you're putting something out into the world. First things first is imposter syndrome, or the feeling that comes with it, is common. That's the thing. Don't feel like you're alone in that. It's common. I'd say nearly everyone listening to this podcast has experienced it at some point with doing something new. So I'm going to give you the hard word, all right? You know what you need to do. And in this case, it's starting a podcast. Stop waiting for things to be perfect before you do it. Stop planning every detail. The fear does not disappear. So often we wait for this perfect moment, or so we think there should be a perfect moment, where the fear's gone, where we have enough information, we have enough skills, we have enough confidence. No, it doesn't work like that. I used to think that way as well, but unfortunately the fear doesn't disappear. You just have to show up and you have to get good at learning in the process. So many people look for certainty, but certainty comes from taking action and gaining momentum. What happens is when you show up consistently, not perfectly, consistently, You build competence in that area. So when you practice a skill time and time again, you get better at it. That's why I said at the start I was really rigid and monotone. As I'm learning more, I'm flowing with the podcast a bit more. When you start getting that competence, that then builds the confidence. You feel capable to do it again. You can go back to the drawing board, you can make adjustments, and then you can show up again. And then when you're feeling that confidence, that energy of confidence of like, yes, I know what I'm talking about. People are listening. I am worthy of speaking in the podcast instance. That then encourages more action. And that creates that loop of momentum. So, imposter syndrome, I really see it as a gap between where you want to be and where you're currently at. It's really important to know that nobody starts fully good at anything. It's about making mistakes and taking learnings along the way. And when you're feeling imposter syndrome, it often comes from forgetting this normal learning curve. You're already comparing yourself to people that have probably been doing it for a long time, that have gone through this whole process of learning, failing, trying again. So don't forget about that. Do you know what holds so many people back from doing the thing, taking action on that thing that they really want to do, putting themselves out there, starting the podcast, starting the project? It's that fear of judgment and criticism. And that had me held back for so long. Okay, so if you're resonating with this, it's a very common one. And it often comes from childhood wounding. It comes from a belief that you learned in the past around showing up authentically and being judged, or constantly being validated for doing things perfectly. Therefore, you're scared to step out and be judged or disliked in another instance. When you show up and do that thing and take the first step for yourself, you are really opening yourself up to judgment and criticism. And at the start, that's really scary. You know, your nervous system has to recalibrate to that potential. But when you do it more and more and more, it is the most freeing thing. Okay. And it really helps you move past imposter syndrome when you realize that actually, if I continue to show up and I put myself out there, even if I may be judged, even if I may be criticized, even if people don't resonate, that is me being authentic to myself. That is what helps us shift through imposter syndrome. One more thing, nobody is watching you as closely as you think they are. Everyone is too busy directing their own lives, dealing with their own problems to be worried about you, to be overthinking about you, to be criticizing your every move. Okay? Do the thing. If you want some inspiration, like I said, go back to the start of this podcast. Actually, something else, go back all the way to my Instagram. When I was, I'd say 2021, look at my first reels, and I literally look like a possum in the headlights, frozen. There've been moments where I've wanted to go and delete those reels, but actually I'm not going to, because I'm enjoying the process of becoming. That is how we move through imposter syndrome. We show up consistently. There is no shame in being a beginner. There is no shame in learning in the process. Don't get 10 years down the track and look back and wish you had started. Just start. And next question, what have we got? What is your number one nervous system tool to stay regulated? Cool. I like this question. So when we're talking about regulation, just to recap, remember, a regulated nervous system doesn't necessarily mean a calm nervous system. It's more about having a flexible nervous system. So if you need to access that fight or flight, that sympathetic on alert state, you can. And then in an ideal world, our nervous system will go back into a rested parasympathetic state where it can relax and heal. So when we've got the flexibility like that, it means that we are healthy, we are regulated, rather than staying on alert, staying in hypervigilance, which is quite common in today's day and age. I have done a whole episode on nervous system regulation. I think it's episode 2 or 3, so you can go back and check that out first. What is my number one tool? Well, breath work, meditation, some other somatic body-based practices, self-touch practices, they are all amazing tools to regulate the nervous system, or at least bring the nervous system back into a parasympathetic rested state. So we know that when we take long, deep breaths, our heart rate lowers, it changes our nervous system state. They are quick ways to bring yourself back to a state of presence and ease. However, I think these things get so much airtime, and you can do all these things, but if you're not examining your deeper rooted limiting beliefs, these regulation practices will be limited in themselves. So actually, my most underrated nervous system tool is to look at your beliefs, because your beliefs mobilize and dictate your biochemistry, and that is your nervous system state. This is what I really help my clients do. We take a dive into your stories and your history, your subconscious mind, what's running there. We look at patterns and beliefs and past experiences that might be dysregulating the nervous system and still keeping someone stuck in an alarm stress state. I'll give you some examples. Beliefs are like programming, and they come out in our self-talk and our behaviors. So they're like stored bits of information in our database, in our subconscious database. And often we aren't aware of them until we start exploring them. So if you've got this belief of, I have to earn my worth, then how you show up in life, you're constantly under pressure, doing more, and trying to prove yourself. So that will tip you into a state of dysregulation. If you have a belief of other people's needs come before my own, you're constantly going to be abandoning yourself and be depleted emotionally. And again, that's going to tip you more into fight or flight and dysregulation, because you're staying stuck on high alert, trying to anticipate everyone else's needs. It's the same with beliefs. These are just common ones I see, by the way. I'm only valuable when I'm productive. Where did you learn that you were only valuable when you're productive? Again, that means that you're constantly doing and you're not taking any rest. That equals dysregulation. It's not safe to express my emotions, or this feeling of I can't be held in my emotions. That creates a lot of tension and stress on our nervous system. It's the same with not trusting other people, or feeling like you're a burden to other people and therefore putting on a brave face constantly, and that hyper independence. That can cause a lot of tension and dysregulation in the nervous system, because we're not meant to be doing things all alone. So you're starting to get the picture that these beliefs, they're actually nothing to do with breath work or to any body-based practices, but they're beliefs that we have running from our database that are really influencing the way we're showing up and the behaviors we have day to day. Now, that is what I think the biggest nervous system tool is. If you want to shift into a more regulated state, you have to start looking at your stories and your beliefs and what you've learned, often from childhood and over the years. If you need more support on this, then you will love my upcoming offering that I'm working on at the moment, because we're going to be going into this in way more detail, learning how to release beliefs and then bring new life-enhancing beliefs in to work towards. It's all about our day-to-day choices and behaviors that really dictate our nervous system state. And that leads me into the second part of a nervous system tool that, again, is underrated, I should say, is living in alignment with who we really are, making choices in alignment with who we really are. Because no amount of nervous system regulation tool or practice, ice baths, anything like that can make up for a life that's out of alignment with who we are. I know that's a hard truth, but you can do all that stuff. You can add all that stuff to your routine. But if you're staying in dysfunctional relationships, if you're going to that job you hate and you've been complaining about for the last 10 years and still showing up, it is going to put your nervous system into a hypervigilance state. and change your self-talk, which also puts your nervous system into a hypervigilant state. So it's leaning into this question, which so many of us are removed from asking due to conditioning. What is my heart telling me to do? What feels right deep down? Really pausing before we make decisions, before we do habitual things that we don't want to do, and really asking yourself that. And it can be really uncomfortable because we are creatures of habit. We often take the easy road, the easy path. But I truly believe that the most regulated people that I know are the ones that follow their own intuition. There is a lightness about them. It doesn't mean that there's not struggles and challenges and they are dysregulated from time to time. But when we are not following our gut instinct, we tend to make decisions that are out of alignment, and that can cause a lot of internal stress. So do the hard things, ask the hard questions, face the parts of you that you've kept hidden, keep showing up for yourself, and naturally you will start to regulate. And I can say this for my own journey, to be honest. I used to do so much proving. I used to follow the rules. I used to do and make decisions based on what other people would want for me. It wasn't until I really stepped into listening to myself, and that comes with practice and doing what I want to do and really trusting myself, that I started to feel more at ease. And that really shows in my health. I rarely get sick. I don't get panic attacks anymore. A lot of this comes down from all these micro decisions and choices that I've made over the years. It's an accumulation effect, and it's something that we can all practice. Next question: how do I work on my boundaries? I find myself overextending without even thinking. Love this question because so many people will relate to this. And before I even start to answer this, listen to the episode on boundaries early on. I think it might be episode 6. And listen to the episode on stop being a nice person, be a good person. They are 2 ones that you'll get a lot from. So first thing, I can fully relate to this as a recovering people pleaser. Now, number 1, understand that it comes from somewhere. People pleasing is not who you are. This is a habit and a behavior that you've found safety in. It may have been in the past that you were validated for being a helpful, responsible person, a good girl, a good woman or man, doing the right thing. It may have been that you were naturally more the responsible one, so you took on that responsibility from a younger age. It may have been that speaking up and having autonomy was actually unsafe. So there are so many reasons which can lead us into people-pleasing behavior. That is just one part of it, and then there's conditioning, societal conditioning. There's a lot of stuff. The second thing I'd encourage you to do is look at your narrative. Explore your story that you're telling yourself about boundaries or overextending. So there are physical boundaries we can implement, as in like, I don't have the space to help you with that task. You can stop yourself from going out of your way physically, but there's also emotional and energetic boundaries. And that is when we realize that we don't have any boundaries. People are dumping stuff on us. People are assuming that we're going to take emotional responsibility. So there's different boundaries and different ways in which our boundaries lack and we overextend ourselves. Now, there was this time in my life where I really prided myself on being that person that was really good at giving advice, being the responsible one, being someone who could overextend in terms of helping emotionally. And the reality is, what my story was, is that I got something from that. I actually liked doing that because of the feeling it gave me. It gave me this feeling of being useful. It gave me this feeling of like saving people from their pain, pulling them up. And I was emotionally available for other people, but not always for myself and my own needs. meaning I constantly put on this front of being nice and kind and happy to listen and take things on, holding space for other people. But then I realized it's actually really hard for people to hold space for me. So you have to get to the point of looking at your stories and asking yourself, what am I actually getting out of this? What story have I created around this that's driving these behaviors? Initially, my story was like, I'm just being kind. I'm just giving a listening ear. I'm just helping. But I had to change my story because I realized it's not about being kind. It's actually self-betrayal. It's actually fear of rejection. It's fear of intimacy. And when you're over empathizing and not having boundaries or overextending emotionally without a sense of self, without thinking about your own needs, it can actually become really dangerous. So you may be doing this physically, helping, like I said, helping people physically. You may be doing it emotionally, getting clear on that, and then really thinking about your stories that you have attached to it. What am I hoping to gain by doing this? What am I hoping to gain when I neglect my own needs and go out of my way for other people more than myself? Might be feeling good, it might be feeling useful, it might be connection. What I realized is I was not only trying to feel useful in myself, I was trying to guard people from their own lessons and their own learnings. What a funny thing that I would do, assume that people couldn't handle their own stuff, so I could go and save them and make myself feel better. That was a story that was no longer going to work for me. So the first thing is get honest. What is this actually serving me by doing this? Honesty leads to freedom. And like I said, it always has the root. So if you're interested more in the root, then go back to, I'd say another good episode is the one on attachment styles, and think about it from the perspective of gaining love and what you needed to do to gain love, especially growing up. Now, the next thing I encourage you to do is look into your triggers. So get clear on where you are overextending or where your boundaries are lacking. Maybe you're overgiving in terms of helping physically. Maybe you're fawning, which means that you are just agreeing to keep the peace, or you're jumping in to take responsibility because you can't be with the uncomfortableness of silence or no one stepping up. A trigger that I see consistently with people who lack boundaries or overextend is this feeling of resentment and tiredness. So when you start to feel irritated or bitter towards someone, even if they haven't done anything new, or you catch yourself thinking, why do I always have to be the person who da-da-da-da-da? That's when you know that you're verging on resentment, and that is a sign that you need to reassess your own needs and put the spotlight back on yourself and ask yourself what you need, or what conversation you need to have, or what boundary you need to set. And then I think the other things when it comes to boundaries and overextending, it's really looking at what we can do on the spot to break that circuit. And a lot of that comes with finding the language and new ways to respond. So of course, if someone asks you to do something, you could just say no, but that may be not taken well. You can use space holders like, I'll get back to you, let me have a check and I'll get back to you. Or if someone is sharing something personal with you, you could just say something like, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that you feel safe enough to share that with me right now, without feeling like you have to take the weight on. So simply by changing the language, you can really create more space and start to break those predictable habits. The thing is, when you've been someone who's been overextending for a long period of time and it's become habitual, when you start to do this, you will be in discomfort when people are taken aback or you're responding differently. And I think one of the most important things we can do is to sit with that discomfort and trust and know that it's just part of the process of learning to honor your own needs. Because if you've been showing up in a particular identity for so long and then you start acting differently and you don't have the same capacity, people are going to start to question, well, what's happened to the old version of you? You were my go-to person. But remember that real love and genuine connections, they don't need performance. If these people are genuinely in your life for the right reasons, they will understand if you don't have the full capacity. They will understand if you are growing and you're choosing not to prioritize the same things. You're choosing to work on your own energy. You do not need to justify. And once you can be with that discomfort, and it happens a few times, you start to really build your confidence that I can set boundaries and I can look at my own needs first before I go straight to everyone else's. And that leads really nicely into the last thing I want to say on this point, which is where can you meet your own needs? Where can you start to see in your reality, I am safe. I don't have to prove my worth. I am deserving of rest. I am deserving of support. And I want to leave you guys with a quote that I love. You don't get to be everything for everyone without being nothing to yourself. That's such a powerful quote. It is a balancing act, but remember, you are important and you are far more useful to everyone else around you if you are also pouring into yourself. Very cliche, I know, but very true. All right, next question. This is a good one. How to deal with the feeling of being overjoyed, not to squash that feeling out of fear. Love this one. So, two things come to mind here. Actually, no, first we're going to understand why this comes up. So, if you've had life experiences where good things feel like they've been taken away from you or they don't last, your nervous system becomes more familiar with anticipation of bad things on the way or struggle. And it makes sense, right? So I often use this example with my clients. Like if you've lost your job 3 times within the space of a year, then your nervous system may be on alert when you get your next job because it's like, well, hey, I've been here before. Or if you've gone through multiple relationships and you've been the one who has always had the bad news and been broken up with, it's harder to connect to that feeling of safety when you're in your next relationship. So we have to go through this recalibration and this reteaching period. Reaccessing joy is like turning the brightness up on a light after being in the dark for a long time. That's how it feels to me. And at first, it almost hurts your eyes when you turn the lights on. It feels like too much, but the longer you sit in it, the more your eyes adjust, the more you feel comfortable in it, right? So back to our initial question, how to deal with the feeling of being overjoyed. Number one, you deserve it. You deserve to feel joy. First of all, I want to remind you that. Number two, this is something I do. When the good feeling comes in and you feel that sense of joy and lightness, I want you to let it linger and sit in it. So really notice it when you're getting that feeling of lightness or expansion, or you can breathe easy, or you'll find yourself smiling or laughing. I want you to really pause, take a deep breath in, maybe put your hand on your chest and just say to yourself, it's safe to be here. We're recalibrating your upper limit, teaching and imprinting your nervous system that it's safe to be in joy. What I do is I in those really good moments when in the past I probably would have just brushed through them or my mind wouldn't have been on the present, I do that exact thing and I almost play with the colors. So I personally like a golden ball. I set it in the center of my chest and I let it expand out beyond my body and I just let it sit there for a bit and it feels really light. It feels like a sun's rays. And to me, it feels like I'm allowing goodness and joy and light to come in. So I play around with a visualization. The more times we stop and pause and have an imprint like that on our nervous system, then the more our brain can go back to times when things were good. And that just helps us learn to trust in joy again. The other thing I would say is not to run away from any, I don't like the word negative emotions, but feelings that aren't joyful. So sadness, anger, don't run away from those emotions because it's only when we can really feel into those or just allow ourselves to have those moments that we can actually access that joy and that happiness and freedom again. I used to spend a lot of time in my life like not feeling I'm like really deep and I feel things very easily, but I spent a lot of time not like that. So I didn't really allow myself to feel angry when I was betrayed. I didn't really allow myself to feel sad. And when I actually started feeling those feelings, I noticed that when I felt good, the good felt really good. And when I didn't feel so good, that also felt really strong. But it's like the cap was taken off. So remember, like, don't resist yourself. If you're not having a good day, you're not having a good day, or a good hour, let's say. But the more you can trust and find evidence that that doesn't mean it's going to linger or stay for a long time, you're opening yourself up to more joy again and higher levels of joy. I hope that helps. And I want to remind everyone that we all deserve joy. We all deserve peace. We all deserve lightness. Life works in seasons. So when the joy is there, when the fun is there, when the lightness is there, when the laughing is there, take it and celebrate it and be with it. We only get the present moment. The next question from one of my friends: what are you most proud of at the moment? And what is a challenge you are currently navigating? So, what am I proud of? I mean, I'm proud of a lot of things. My clients are coming to mind. I'm always proud of my clients. I am proud of myself. When it comes to me, I'm proud of never giving up on myself. I am proud of listening to myself. I stopped resisting myself and I'm doing my best to listen to my body and the nudges, which I think come from beyond me. And I've really learned that in life, if I don't listen to that, if I don't take action on these nudges, then I often get roadblocks and things. And I think this is true for all of us. We get roadblocks or things that happen or things take slower and we're pushing against life. The more we can listen to our inner knowing and our body, if I'm consistently tired, then I question, what is this about? If I'm feeling depleted, I'm looking and taking responsibility. So the more we can start to do that, the more we start to trust in life and things start to happen. So I'm really proud that I walk my own path. I'm proud that I don't give up on myself, especially when perhaps the results or the outcomes that I'm looking for in the external world haven't quite happened. But I don't give up in trusting and knowing that things that are for me will never miss me, and that is inevitable. So I'm proud for sticking through the uncomfortableness. What else? And I'm sharing this with you guys. This feels quite vulnerable, but I'm sharing because actually, I think a few of you will connect to these things as well. I am proud for the way I hold myself through things. And sometimes that looks like crumbling, literally having breakdowns and getting upset, having those moments. And also that looks like pulling myself together, having a good talking to myself. So I'm proud in the way I meet myself in each moment. And a lot of that is because I want to reclaim my softness, especially after a lot of trauma. I'm still on that journey, but I have come so far with that because I'm determined not to close my heart off. And that takes showing up consistently, nurturing myself through all the emotions and being there for myself. It's like I'm reparenting myself, giving myself the advice and the love that I need. That is not something I did even 5-10 years ago. This is not a thing I had to do. I wasn't forced to do it. So I'm really proud of the way I deal with my emotions. And one more thing, I'm proud of myself and I'm proud of you if you do things afraid. This is a message for all of us that do things afraid. Because as I've talked about before, there's never the right time. We have to do things afraid. Life is too short to be waiting. Life is too short to be thinking, what if? So I am proud for my ability to back myself even when it's scary. If we want a different outcome, we have to do something different. And often it's scary, it's the unknown, but it's taking the steps forward, being in the process. if you're doing that, then be proud of yourself. I could have given you guys such a light and cliche response for these questions of challenges and proud, but no, I'm going to be real. What was the other thing? Oh, challenge. A challenge I'm moving through. Gosh, there's always challenges to move through. So I think for me, wanting to do so much with my work and actually knowing that I'm here to do so much with my work, and there's so many things that I am yet to finish and I'm working on. And also, so having the time and space to do that and letting myself be supported, because something I still work through is the stories of responsibility, and how I'm moving through that challenge is every time it comes up of like, oh, I have to do this by myself, or, why is everything on me? Or this feels like too much for one person. Then I look at my choices. I'm simply meeting the moment differently and getting real with myself. Is this a belief that's still running, or where are your options here? So I'm really working through doing that from a loving place and catching myself truthfully of like knowing that that's a story that, it makes sense based on my previous experiences, but it's not something that I'm wanting to carry through with me into the next version of myself, because number one, it's unsustainable, and number two, it's unsustainable. And it's simply a lens. It's not the truth. So yeah, basically, just to wrap that up, it's knowing that there's so much I want to do for work and opening up to support, and also trusting that things can be easy, because sometimes I catch myself thinking that things actually need to be harder than they are. And I have this thing that I now do, which is when I wake up, I say, show me how easy it can be. Show me how easy it can be. Show me how easy it can be. And that really helps me change my filter to where can life be easy? Where can what I want, that process, where can it actually be a lot easier than I'm thinking it needs to be? So I'm really on that path as well. And a lot of that is just letting go of tension and responsibility that doesn't belong to me. Things can be easier when I'm really discerning of my energy. And I guess one more challenge. I think grief is always a challenge that I'm moving through and supporting myself through. And, if you are grieving and you're listening to this, then you will know that there's a lot of secondary losses and new layers of grief that come up when you are years into your journey. And as I start to really be open to relationships and really claiming what I want in my future in terms of relationships and family and that kind of thing, that can also bring up a identity layer of grief when I'm meeting new people. But something that I'm really proud of myself for moving through and being honest with, because grief as a challenge can be so heavy, and like I said, it always brings new layers. Yeah, those that get it will get it. But yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about moving through recently. So I look back at where I was a few years ago, especially in terms of like owning what I wanted and how open my heart was, and I'm on a completely different page now. So that is very positive. That is self-growth. And the last question, I'm really glad this one come up, because this is something I was going to say in the podcast anyway, is when's your next in-person lightning process training? Great question. The next in-person lightning process training is the 12th to the 14th of December, and it's in Christchurch. I'm coming back home, so I'll be doing a small group training in Christchurch mid-December. And we've got 2 spaces available on that currently. So if you're ready to retrain your brain, to regulate your nervous systems, to get some really powerful tools, then get in touch. I'll leave all my details in the show notes. And then I'll do the part 2 of this Q&A. We've got more questions on navigating a breakup, old symptoms popping in, and building confidence. The part 2 will be coming in the next month or so. I hope that you've loved today's episode and taken something from those questions that I think really resonate with so many of us. I hope you have a beautiful week ahead, and I'll see you on the next episode.